John Dillinger. On July 22, 1934, 31-year-old John Dillinger died in a Chicago alleyway. Dillinger was declared public enemy number 1 by the FBI for his string of bank robberies and prison escapes. He'd famously escaped jail using a wooden gun carved to look real. The FBI had been hunting Dillinger for months. They finally got a break when Anna Sage, a brothel owner, agreed to betray him. Sage arranged to go to the movies with Dillinger at the Biograph Theater in Chicago on July 22. Sage wore a bright orange dress that appeared red under the streetlights. This was the signal to FBI agents that Dillinger was the man with her. As Dillinger exited the theater after watching Manhattan Melodrama, FBI agents closed in. Dillinger sensed the trap and reached for his pistol. 3 FBI agents opened fire immediately. Dillinger was struck multiple times, with bullets hitting his face and back. John Dillinger collapsed in the dirty alleyway beside the theater. He died within minutes from his gunshot wounds. Crowds gathered around his body, with some allegedly dipping handkerchiefs in his blood as morbid souvenirs. Osama bin Laden. On May 2, 2011, 54-year-old Osama bin Laden died in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Bin Laden was the founder of Al-Qaeda and mastermind of the September 11th attacks. He'd been on the FBI's most wanted list for over a decade, with a $25 million reward. After a 10-year manhunt, the CIA located bin Laden, living in a high-walled compound in a Pakistani suburb. Navy SEALs from DevGru were sent to raid the compound. The operation, codenamed Neptune Spear, began just after midnight. The SEALs entered the compound using stealth helicopters. They methodically cleared the buildings floor by floor. On the 3rd floor, SEALs entered a bedroom where bin Laden was hiding with his wives. Bin Laden was unarmed when the SEALs entered. He was shot once in the chest and once above the left eye. To confirm his identity before extraction, a 6-foot-tall SEAL had to lie down next to the body to measure it against bin Laden's known 6-foot-4-inch height. Bin Laden's body was taken by helicopter to the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson. After Islamic burial rites, his body was buried at sea to prevent any grave from becoming a shrine. James Whitey Bulger. On October 30, 2018, 89-year-old James Bulger died in a federal prison in West Virginia. Bulger was a Boston mob boss who spent 16 years on the FBI's most wanted list. He'd been an FBI informant while simultaneously running a criminal empire. Bulger was finally captured in 2011 in Santa Monica, California. He was convicted of racketeering, extortion, and involvement in 11 murders. Bulger was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences plus 5 years. On October 29, 2018, Bulger was transferred to USP Hazleton, a high-security federal prison in West Virginia. Within hours of arriving, Bulger was targeted by other inmates. The prison had a reputation for violence against informants. On October 30th, 3 inmates ambushed the 89-year-old Bulger in his wheelchair. They used a lock in a sock, a padlock swung inside a sock, as a weapon. The attackers beat Bulger with extreme brutality. Bulger's eyes were nearly gouged out during the attack. He was found dead in his cell. The man who'd spent his life as an FBI informant was killed by fellow prisoners, who despised rats. Andrew Cunanan. On July 23, 1997, 27-year-old Andrew Cunanan died in Miami Beach, Florida. Cunanan was a serial killer who murdered 5 people, including fashion designer Gianni Versace. He'd been on the FBI's 10 most wanted list following Versace's murder. After killing Versace on July 15 outside his Miami Beach mansion, Cunanan went into hiding. A massive manhunt ensued with Cunanan's face plastered across national media. The FBI tracked him to the Miami Beach area. On July 23, a caretaker discovered someone had broken into a houseboat in Miami Beach. Police surrounded the luxury houseboat. SWAT teams prepared to enter and capture Cunanan. Before police could breach the houseboat, a single gunshot rang out from inside. Cunanan had shot himself in the mouth with the same .40 caliber pistol he'd used to kill Versace. He was found dead on a bed inside the houseboat. Andrew Cunanan's suicide ended an 8-day manhunt. He died by his own hand rather than face capture and trial for his crimes. Thomas James Holden. In 1953, 61-year-old Thomas James Holden died of natural causes in prison. Holden held the distinction of being the very first person ever placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. When it was created in 1950, Holden was a ruthless bank robber and career criminal. After escaping from Leavenworth Penitentiary, Holden went on the run for years. He murdered his wife and her brothers in Chicago before fleeing to Oregon. Holden's placement on the inaugural Most Wanted list proved the program's effectiveness. In June 1951, a man drinking beer with Holden in an Oregon bar recognized his face from a Most Wanted poster in the local newspaper. The man contacted authorities. Holden was arrested without incident. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Thomas Holden died behind bars a few years later, from natural causes. The first man on the FBI's Most Wanted list ended his life in a prison cell, never again tasting freedom. Alvin Creepy Karpis. On August 26, 1979, 71-year-old Alvin Karpis died in Torremolinos, Spain. Karpis was the last Public Enemy-era gangster to be caught. He holds the distinction of being personally arrested by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover in 1936. Karpis spent 26 years imprisoned at Alcatraz, longer than any other inmate. After his release in 1969, Karpis was deported to Canada and eventually settled in Spain. He wrote an autobiography titled The Alvin Karpis Story, On August 26, 1979, Karpis was found dead in his Spanish apartment. A bottle of sleeping pills was spilled across a manuscript he'd been working on. The official ruling was suicide by overdose. However, Karpis's friends believed his death was accidental. They claimed he'd likely mixed sleeping pills with alcohol, leading to an unintentional fatal overdose. The truth of whether Karpis intentionally killed himself remained uncertain. Alvin Karpis died far from America, the last survivor of the gangster era that created the FBI's most wanted list. He died alone in Spain, decades removed from his criminal past. William Bradford Bishop Jr. disappeared in 1976 and is presumed dead. If alive, he would be in his late 70s. Bishop was a State Department employee who allegedly murdered his entire family with a sledgehammer. On March 1, 1976, Bishop's mother, wife, and 3 sons were found dead in North Carolina. Their bodies had been burned in a shallow pit in the woods. Bishop's car was found abandoned near Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Bishop vanished completely after the murders. Despite alleged sightings across Europe and extensive FBI investigation, Bishop was never captured. He was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 2014. If Bishop died, he likely lived out his years under a false identity. He may have died a respectable old man, taking his secret to an unmarked grave. The FBI continues to list Bishop as a fugitive. William Bradford Bishop Jr. achieved what few fugitives manage, a complete escape. Whether dead or alive, he remains one of the FBI's most frustrating unsolved cases. Mutulu Shakur. On July 6, 2023, 72-year-old Mutulu Shakur died at home in California. Shakur was a leader of the Black Liberation Army and stepfather of rapper Tupac Shakur. He spent decades on the FBI's most wanted list for his role in the 1981 Brinks robbery. The armored car robbery resulted in the deaths of 2 police officers and a security guard. Shakur went on the run but was captured in 1986. He was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in federal prison. After 37 years of incarceration, Shakur was diagnosed with terminal bone marrow cancer. His family and supporters campaigned for compassionate release. In December 2022, Shakur was granted release due to his terminal illness. Shakur spent his final 7 months as a free man in a private residence. He died peacefully at home, surrounded by family. The man the FBI once called a domestic terrorist died a natural death. Mutulu Shakur's peaceful end contrasted sharply with the violent crime that put him on the most wanted list. He died free after decades behind bars. Charles Pretty Boy Floyd. On October 22, 1934, 30-year-old Charles Floyd died in an Ohio cornfield. Floyd was a Depression-era bank robber who became a folk hero to some. He allegedly burned mortgage papers during bank robberies, freeing farmers from debt. The FBI had been hunting Floyd for his suspected involvement in the Kansas City massacre. On October 22, FBI agents and local police spotted Floyd near East Liverpool, Ohio. Floyd attempted to flee across a cornfield. FBI agents and police opened fire with Thompson's submachine guns. Floyd was struck multiple times as he ran through the corn. He collapsed from his wounds but remained conscious. As Floyd lay dying, he reportedly spoke his last words to the agents. "I'm done for. You've hit me twice." Floyd died from his gunshot wounds in the cornfield. His body was returned to Oklahoma for burial. Charles Floyd's funeral drew over 20,000 mourners. Many rural Americans saw him as a Robin Hood figure despite his criminal record. Pretty Boy Floyd died at 30, gunned down while running through corn. Ma Barker. On January 16, 1935, 61-year-old Kate Ma Barker died in a Florida cottage. Ma Barker was allegedly the matriarch of the Barker Karpis gang. The FBI claimed she masterminded her son's criminal activities, though this has been disputed by historians. The FBI tracked Ma Barker and her son Fred to a cottage on Lake Weir in Florida. On January 16th, agents surrounded the house and demanded surrender. Instead of surrendering, the Barkers opened fire. What followed was the longest shootout in FBI history at the time. Ma Barker and Fred fired over 2,000 rounds at FBI agents. The gunfight lasted approximately 4 hours. When the shooting finally stopped, agents cautiously entered the cottage. They found Ma Barker dead with a Thompson submachine gun still in her hands. Fred Barker was also dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Whether Ma Barker was truly a criminal mastermind or just a mother loyal to her criminal sons remains debated. She died fighting rather than surrendering to federal agents. Donald Eugene Webb. Donald Eugene Webb is presumed to have died around 1999 at approximately 60 years old. Webb was wanted for the 1980 murder of Police Chief Gregory Adams in Pennsylvania. He spent 25 years on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, a record at the time. Webb shot Chief Adams during a traffic stop and disappeared. Despite extensive investigation, the FBI couldn't locate him. Webb remained on the most wanted list from 1981 to 2007. In 2017, the FBI made a shocking discovery. Webb had died in 1999 at his wife's home in Massachusetts. His wife had hidden him in a secret room behind a closet for nearly 20 years after the murder. Webb suffered several strokes while in hiding and eventually died in the house. His wife buried him in the backyard. She kept his death secret for another 18 years until the FBI investigation discovered the truth. Donald Eugene Webb evaded capture his entire life. He died hidden in a secret room, buried by his loyal wife who maintained the secret for decades. George Machine Gun Kelly. On July 18, 1954, 59-year-old George Kelly died in Leavenworth Penitentiary, Kansas. Kelly was a Prohibition-era gangster famous for kidnapping oil tycoon Charles Urschel. He allegedly coined the term G-men when arrested. Kelly famously surrendered to FBI agents in 1933 by shouting, "Don't shoot G-men." He was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison. Kelly spent time at both Alcatraz and Leavenworth. Unlike many of his contemporaries who died in shootouts, Kelly served his time quietly. He became a model prisoner and worked in the prison industries. Kelly spent over 20 years behind bars. On July 18, 1954, Kelly's 59th birthday, he suffered a sudden massive heart attack. He died in Leavenworth while still serving his life sentence. There was no birthday celebration, just death in a prison cell. George Machine Gun Kelly died of natural causes after 2 decades of imprisonment. The gangster who once terrorized the nation died quietly on his birthday. Frederick J. Tenuto. Frederick Tenuto disappeared in 1947 and is presumed dead. Tenuto was a mob hitman who escaped from prison in Pennsylvania. He was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in 1950. Tenuto worked for the mob in New York and Philadelphia. After his prison escape, he vanished completely. The FBI conducted extensive searches but found no trace of him. The FBI believes Tenuto was murdered by the mob shortly after his escape. Organized crime likely killed him to prevent him from becoming a liability. Tenuto probably ended up in a concrete jacket at the bottom of a river or buried in an unmarked location. No body was ever recovered. Tenuto simply vanished from history. The FBI eventually removed him from the Most Wanted list, concluding he'd been dead for years. Frederick Tenuto is one of the great ghosts of the Most Wanted program. He disappeared so completely that even the FBI couldn't determine his exact fate. Ruth Eisenman Shear. Ruth Eisenman Shear is presumed to have died of natural causes, sometime in the 1990s or 2000s. Eisenman Shear was the first woman ever placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in 1968. She'd participated in a bizarre kidnapping where the victim was buried alive in a ventilated box. Eisenman Shear and her partner kidnapped Barbara Jane Mackle, burying her in a fiberglass-reinforced box with minimal air supply. Mackle was rescued after 83 hours underground. Eisenman Shear was caught working as a waitress in Oklahoma. After serving time in prison, Eisenman Shear was deported to Honduras. She disappeared from public view completely. Like many fugitives who escaped the headlines, she likely died of natural causes in total obscurity. No obituary or death record has been publicly confirmed. Eisenman Shear lived out her final years far from the crime that made her infamous. She died forgotten, a footnote in FBI history. Ted Bundy. On January 24, 1989, 42-year-old Ted Bundy died in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Bundy was one of America's most notorious serial killers. He escaped from custody twice before being added to the FBI's Most Wanted list. Bundy confessed to murdering 30 women, though the actual number is likely higher. He was captured in Florida in 1978 and convicted of multiple murders. Bundy was sentenced to death. After years of appeals, Bundy's execution was scheduled for January 24, 1989. Outside the prison, a crowd of hundreds gathered. As 2,000 volts surged through Bundy in the electric chair nicknamed Old Sparky, the crowd outside erupted. People cheered, set off fireworks, and grilled Bundy burgers on portable grills. The execution became a macabre celebration. Bundy was pronounced dead at 7:16 a.m. Ted Bundy died strapped to an electric chair while a crowd celebrated outside. The serial killer who terrorized America was executed to cheers and fireworks.